Chapter 4. Down went Stan through the terraced streets, past the Shipwright Arms and the Salvation Army Hospital, and the Oxfam shop, and the shuffling men. He ran across the race ground to the fair. It was huge and noisy and bright, and the merry-go-rounds were turning, but it was still early, so hardly anyone was there. Just a handful of truants, a couple of women pushing ancient buggies, more glum-looking shuffling men, and the fairground folk themselves with gold teeth and shocks of hair, silver studs glinting in their cheeks, and bags of chinking coins around their waist. They leaned on their rides and their stools, swigged mugs of tea and smoked strange-smelling cigarettes. They stared at Stan as he stepped shyly by. They muttered together in strange accents. They coughed and cursed and spat and roared with laughter. Stan rode a merry-go-round all alone. He spun on the waltzer all alone. All alone he rose into the air on the Ferris wheel. He looked down on his world, the river, the terraced streets, the spaces where all the shipyards and factories used to be. He saw his old school, St. Mungo's, and all the kids playing in the playground. He saw his own home in Fishkey Lane. He saw the steam from his uncle's machine seething through its roofs. Round and round he went, up and down, round and up and down. He saw the distant city and the distant mountains. He saw the glittering lovely sea going on forever, the deep blue lovely sky going on forever. He remembered his lovely mum and dad, and high up there in the sky he shed a few quiet tears for them. He thought of his aunt and uncle, and he gave thanks for them. He imagined the world beyond the sea and the universe beyond the sky, and his head reeled in the vastness of it all, and of the astonishingness of it all. Down at earth again he ate a slippery hot dog and sticky candy floss. He licked his lips and his fingers and wandered past an ancient red and green gypsy caravan. Gypsy Rose was painted above its little door. A white pony stood beside it wearing a nosebag. A woman in a brightly patterned shawl came to the door. She beckoned Stan with her forefinger. "I am the great-great-granddaughter of the true Gypsy Rose," she told him. "Come inside, and I will fill your head with wonders and secrets." Stan licked the last of his candy floss from his fingers. "I will tell you when your times of trouble will be at an end," Gypsy Rose said. "How do you know I've got troubles?" said Stan. "It's clear to them with eyes that see." "What is your name, young man?" "Stan," said Stan. "Give me just a single piece of silver, Stan," she said. She lowered her voice further. "Be brave and come inside." Stan was about to step up into the caravan when his eyes were caught by a flickering of gold. Goldfish. They were hanging on a line on a hooker duck stool. There were 13 of them, tiny goldfish, each one swimming in a tiny plastic bag that dangled on an orange string and hung there in the sun. Without thinking, he moved away from the Gypsy Rose towards the fish. Gypsy Rose spoke again. "Farewell," she said. "You are entranced. You will be dejected. You will travel, and we will meet again." She went back inside. Stan moved closer to the hooker duck stool. The bags were so tiny, the amount of water so small. The fish were so lovely, so miraculously, with their golden skin and their gills and their fins and their panting mouths and their delicate scales and their tender dark eyes. He reached up towards one. "Oi, what you doing, kid?" Stan flinched. A man appeared by his side, standing beside the stool below the fish. "I said, what you doing?" Stan shook his head. "Just looking at the fish," he whispered. The man was little, with a shiny, smooth face and black hair that came to a pointy widow's peak. He had a single golden earring. He wore an ancient, dusty red satin with splashes of grease on it. Behind him, the dirty plastic ducks with hooks on their heads floated in endless circles on a green plastic pool. Beyond the ducks was an old caravan. A girl stared out gloomily from its murky windows. She rubbed the glass with her fingertips and made a tiny peephole and peeped through it at Stan. "No just looking," snapped the man. "You gotta win 'em, boy." He pointed to a sign. "Hooker duck, £2 a go, a prize every time." Stan looked at his money. Less than £2 left. Not even enough for a single turn. "But it's cruel," he protested. "They've got hardly any water, and they—" The man just shrugged. "You want to help 'em? You got to win 'em," he said. He looked straight past Stan into the rest of the fair. Stan saw that the tiniest goldfish of all was hardly moving and was coming to a halt. "But they're dying," he said. The man glanced at the fish, then shrugged again. "They die. I get some more. It's easy." But I could save them. How much you got? Asked the man. £1.66, said Stan. The man pointed to the sign. £2 a go. But what good is it if it's dead? Begged Stan. He held out his £1.66. Please, mister, please. The man sniffed. He looked at the money in Stan's palm. Okay, he sighed. Call me a softie, but you gotta take the dying one, and no cheating, mind. He took the money and gave Stan a long stick with a dangling string and a hook on the end. Stan reached towards the cruising ducks, but he was shaking and trembling, and he couldn't stop looking up at the dying fish in its tiny bag of water. The man clicked his tongue. Kids these days, he muttered. Don't anyone even teach you to hook properly? And so he slipped Stan's hook onto a duck, and Stan lifted it up from the water. He grabbed the bag with the dying fish in it, but he just couldn't leave the others. They'll all die, he said. If nobody wants them, then they'll... The man held out his palm. But I've got nothing left. The man contemplated Stan. You could work for them, I suppose, he said. Work? Aye, said the man. He nodded to himself. That's a good idea, if that is, you know what work is. I do know, said Stan. Huh, that'll make a change. The man stroked his chin. You could, for instance, scrub them ducks. He spat on the ground. Just look at the state of them. They're filthy. Okay, said Stan quickly. He rolled up his sleeves. What do I do? The man pointed at the plastic bucket. You got that scrubber, and you get that soap, and you scrub. Stead easy. Stanley got straight to it. He scrubbed the ducks frantically. He kept glancing at the fish. They turned slowly and more slowly in little plastic bags. That's very good, that, said the man. My daughter's supposed to do it, but she thinks it's beneath her. That's her back there. Look, the big lazy lump. Stan stole a quick glance. The pale girl peeped through her peephole. She's called Natasha, said the man. He looked at her and shook his head, then pointed at Stan, who was working faster and faster until all the ducks were shining bright. Natasha turned her nose up and looked away. The man began to pick up the ducks and inspect them. Count the fish now, pleaded Stan. The man held up a small yellow duck. Little dab of muck left here, he said. Stan grabbed it, scrubbed it, polished it again. Now, said Stan. The man pondered. He lifted, slowly, an orange duck to his eyes. Stan couldn't bear it. By now, all the fish were floundering. They were drifting. They weren't swimming. They were dropping slowly downwards in their tiny little plastic bags. I'll have them now, he said. They're mine. And he stretched up and took all 12 of them down, hanging the bags from his outstretched fingers. Okay, he demanded. What's your name? Said the man. But Stan was already running towards the river. He ran out the fair, he ran across the rubble and past the derelict sheds and the warehouses, and he slithered through an ancient iron fence and flung himself down on the edge of the riverbank, where there was just a short drop to the water. And he lowered the plastic bags one by one, and allowed the river water to fill them up. Then he held them to the sky. The water in the bags was murkier now. Little bits and fragments swirled, and grease slick floated at the top. But in each one of them, at the centre of the murk, there was a flicker and a flash of living gold. Stan sighed with relief and delight. Then he noticed the man from the stall standing close behind him. You're a softie, aren't you? Said the man. But I can see you're a good worker. What's your name, Stan? Oh, what's your name? Stan, said Stan. I'm Dostoevsky, said the man. He stretched out his hand. Stan didn't take it. Dostoevsky shrugged. I ain't as bad as I seem, he said. Now how do you fancy a job on the hooker duck stall? No, thank you very much, mister, said Stan. I'll pay you well. It's steady work. Whatever the problems come in the world, there'll always be need for the hooker duck stall. But Stan said no again, and headed homewards with the 13 gold fish dangling from his fingers. Chapter 5. Back at 69 Fishkey Lane there had been trouble. While Stan was at the hooker duck stall, a rusty white van pulled up outside the house. It had massive writing on it. DAFT, Department for the Abolition of Fishy Things. www.daft.gov. Something fishy going on? Wanna get somebody in trouble? Call the Snitcher Nabot line 0191 8765432. All calls treated in strictest confidence. There was a tiny window in the side of the van. Behind the window, there was a telescope pointing straight at Ernie's house. Behind the telescope, there was a little man. "Just what we thunk," muttered the man to himself. "How disgraceful! How absolutely appalling!" He scribbled notes into a notepad. He straightened his shirt. He fastened his black tie neatly. He wedged a black leather folder under his arm. Then he stepped out of the van and rapped on Ernie's door. Ernie, of course, with all the banging and clattering and chanting and singing, heard nothing. The man rapped again. Again, no answer. He leaned down and peered through the letterbox. "Ah," he muttered, "exactly what we thought." He called through the letterbox. "Open up in there. The Department for the Abolition of Fishy Things is come to call." No answer. He yelled again. No answer. He tutted and grunted and stamped his feet. How disgraceful! How absolutely appalling! He grabbed the door handle. "Are yous coming in now?" he called. The door opened easily. The man stepped inside. He was confronted by pipes, by cables, by whirring wheels and spinning cogs, by buckets of fish and boxes of tins. He stepped forward, investigating as he went. He scribbled in his notepad. "How absolutely disgusting," he said. "What a nutter disgrace." He heard Ernie singing. He saw Ernie sprawled across the machine, kicking a lever with his left foot, spinning a cog with his right, clicking a switch with his right hand, pressing a button with his left. "Machine!" yelled Ernie. "Machine, machine, machine, machine!" "Ahem," said the investigator. Ernie looked around. "Who the heck are you?" he said. The investigator clicked his heels. "I is," he said. "A-D-A-F-T, investigator." "A what?" said Ernie. "An investigator," said the investigator. "An investigator what investigates things, strange things, peculiar things, things what shouldn't even be things." He stepped a little closer. "Fishy things." He narrowed his eyes. "And there's something fishy here, Mr. He raised his pencil ready to write notes next to his name. "Mr. None of your business," said Ernie. He broke free of his leaves and switches. "Mister, get out of my bloomin' house," he said. "Mister, who do you think you are coming here without a by your leave? Mister, if you don't shift your bum, I might just have to kick it. Mister—" The investigator raised his hands. "Not a very intelligent approach," he said. "You is talking to Mr. Clarence P. Clapp, Esquire, trained investigator for first grade with 7 stars, 2 pips, and a certificate signed by none other than His Grand Fishiness, the department leader, hisself. Touch me, and you is in deep trouble, mister." Ernie clamped his lips tight shut. "Ha!" said Clarence P. Clapp. "The tight-lipped method, the silent approach. I has been taught everything you need to know about that method, and let me tell you, it will get you exactly nowhere." He cast a beady eye around the house. "This," he said, "is not allowed. Nor is this, nor is this, nor is this, and nor is this. And this is absolutely disgraceful, and that is absolutely appalling, and this thing here is the worst thing I has ever saw." He scribbled a little more. He pursed his lips and narrowed his eyes. "What exactly has been going on here, Mr. Silent?" "Nothing," said Ernie. Clarence scribbled down his reply. And he continued, "How long exactly has it been going on?" "Never," said Ernie. "Ha!" declared Clarence. "These answers I know is nothing but absolute of lies. My training has prepared me for everything. I see what a disgracious state of affairs exists here, and it cannot go on, and it will be stopped." "Oh, yeah?" said Ernie. "Oh, yeah," said Clarence P. Clapp. "I has the letter of the law on my side. I has the power vested in me by the High Chief Investigator of Fishy Things. I will write my report and give notice and be served, and all of this will come to a nutter complete stop. I leave you my card." He shoved a business card into Ernie's hand. Then he turned and headed back towards the front door. He paused for a moment. "If I was you, Mr. Silent," he said softly, "I would set to work right now, this very minute, to get this house back to normal, or the department will be coming on you like a ton of bricks. Farewell, or should I say Vasta la Hista." And he went out, slamming the door behind him.
Chapter 6. Stan ran back across the waste ground, through the terraced streets and up Fish Key Lane towards home. The daft van passed by, but he didn't notice it. He was entranced by his fish, obsessed by his fish. He slipped in through the door and went to find an empty bucket. Then he filled it full of lovely clear water and slipped his lovely goldfish into it one by one. There they were, 13 beautiful, miraculous creatures, swimming together and free before his eyes. His uncle was already back at work. The machines were booming and banging and clashing louder than before. Ernie was yelling louder than ever. Stan lifted the buckets of fish. "Don't worry about the noise," he whispered to them. "It's just my Uncle Ernie. I'll look after you for ever and ever and ever." "Stan! Stan! Get here, lad!" Stan turned. "But Uncle Ernie," he started. "Never mind but Uncle Ernie. Get here, lad!" Ernie waved him forward. "There's a crisis," he said. "A blooming great, huge, massive catastrophe." Stan shuffled slowly towards him. "But Uncle Ernie," he said. "We're under attack, and all you can say is, 'But Uncle Ernie.' Get here. Pull that lever. Switch that switch. Grease that blinking engine." He caught sight of the fish. "What's them?" Stan realised he was still carrying the bucket. "They're goldfish," he said. "I won them at the fair. I won that little one with your birthday money, Uncle Ernie." Ernie curled his lips. "Ah," he said, "scrawny little things." "But look," said Stan. He held them towards his uncle so that he could see their loveliness for himself. Ernie squinted at them, then dipped his finger into the water. "Goldfish," he grunted at last. "What good's goldfish to a man like me? Pilchards is the fish that matter, pilchards and added and cod." He lowered his hand further into the water, and the goldfish swam around it. "See?" said Stan. "Aren't they just lovely?" Ernie gazed down, pondering. He felt the fins and tails of the little fish as they flickered past his fingers. "Thanks for the £10, Uncle Ernie," said Stan. Then he said a thing that he'd regret for ever after. "If you hadn't given me that fish, they would have—" "Would have what?" asked Ernie. "Would have died. There was this man who hung them up on—" Ernie's eyes went all dreamy. Then he came back to his senses. "Enough," he said. "We're living through times of tests and trials and tribulations. There's work to be done and action to be took. Get these silly little creatures out of my sight and get to blooming work now." Stan ran to his cupboard and put the fish down. He ran back to the machines and rolled up his sleeves. He was happier than he'd been for weeks. He'd had time off. He'd been to the fair. He'd won the most brilliant of prizes. "Right, what should I do?" "Stand there. That's right. Turn that. That's right. Push that. That's right. That's the way to do it. Faster, lad, faster, faster. They won't put a stop to it. Oh no, they won't ruin the dreams of Ernest Potts." "Who won't, Uncle Ernie?" asked Stan, as he pushed and pulled and swivelled and turned. "Never mind that," said Ernie. "I'll deal with them. You just concentrate on your work, lad. Faster, faster. That's right. Fish, fish, fish. Machine, machine, machine. That's the way it's got to get done." And they worked together and sang together. "Fish in buckets, fish in bins. Chop off their heads and tails and fins." Their voices blended with the noise of the machine, and the movements blended with the movement of the machines. The fish poured in at one end, and the tins poured out at the other. And in the fury of the work, Stan and his uncle completely forgot about all their troubles, and after a time, Ernie yelled, "Are you enjoying it, lad? Aren't you having a great time?" Stan laughed and gave him a thumbs up. "Yes, Uncle Ernie, yes," he called. "Great," said Ernie. "This is work, son. Proper work. Your dad would have been proud of you. This is what it's all about." And they hooted with laughter, and they worked and sang, and were filled with a strange kind of joy. And they were making such a din, they didn't notice Annie coming in. Chapter 7. Annie had a party tea in her shopping bag. Cheese straws, sausage rolls, lemonade, chocolate tea cakes, and a cake with happy birthday iced on it, and a bag of candles. She pulled a few pallets together for a table. She used fish tin labels as napkins. She set upside-down buckets as chairs. She laid the birthday tea out, and it looked so lovely, the loveliest thing there had been in this house since the canning began. She smiled in satisfaction. Then she went to the central control panel, found the enormous lever with Master Switch written on it, reached up and pulled it down. The machines came to a sudden stop. "Sabotage!" yelled Ernie. "Get ready to fight back. They won't—" "It isn't sabotage," said Annie calmly. "It's tea time." Tea time? Said Ernie. Don't you realise we're living through a time of your nephew's birthday, Annie said. So take a break and come to tea. Ernie glared, sputtered, gasped. But there's... Annie went over to him and kissed his cheek. This is special, she said, so pipe down for once. Stan detached himself from his machine. Half in a daze, he walked towards the lovely things laid out on the pallets. Annie clapped her hands. This is our nephew Stan, she said to her husband, and he is rather more important than our fish. I've got fish of my own now, Aunt Annie, said Stan. He showed her his goldfish and told the story of how he got them. Oh, they're gorgeous, said Annie. They're the most beautiful fish in the whole wide world. Stan put the bucket by the pallet, and as they ate, they kept looking down at the goldfish and praising them. All except Ernie, of course, who couldn't eat at all. The memory of the investigator's visit rushed and rolled and rocked through his brain. Calm down, Ernie, Annie kept saying. Calm down and eat some cake. But he couldn't calm down. The cake was like dust in his mouth. How could he tell his family about Clarence P. Clapp? How could he face up to the catastrophe? He clenched his fists tight. He needed a plot, a plan. The goldfish flickered and flashed below him. He dipped his hand into the bucket and felt their tiny tails and fins against his fingers. We need a new line, he declared. Oh, what? Said Annie. We've got to move on from pilchards and cod. Move on to what? Said Annie. And why? 'Cause we're under attack, said Ernie. Annie shook her head. What on earth are you on about, love? Suddenly there was a hammering at the front door. Then silence. What's that? Said Annie. She got up and headed to the door. Don't go, yelled at Ernie. Don't let them in. Don't let who in? Said Annie. Them, said Ernie. Who? Said Annie. She opened the door. There was nobody there, just a white van driving quickly away. Then she saw it, a notice nailed to the door. The notice read, Daft. Department for the Abolishing of Fishy Things. First, last, and final warning. It is hereby declared this 32nd day of June that a madman known as Mr. Silent has been discovered to be up to fishy stuff in his dwelling at 69 Fish Key Lane, and therefore that the madman and his family, if any, is hereby served with a first and last and final warning. All fishy stuff must stop immediately. Otherwise, all fishy paraphernalia, i.e. machines and engines and cables and pipes and all the other stuff I seen, will be forcibly removed. Plus, the said family will be evicted, i.e. hoyed out into the street. Signed, Clarence P. Clapp, Esquire. Investigator, 1st grade, 7 stars, 2 pips. P.S. This is not a joke. P.P.S. Beware, the investigator will return without any warning. You have been warned. Got a fishy neighbour? Call 0191 876 5432. We will sort them out. Visit our website at www.daft.gov.